day, and welcome to our session, Coping with the Holiday Season, How to Manage Stress, Overwhelm, and Other Emotions. My name is Jackie Butt, and I'm the Provincial Groups Coordinator with the Mental Health and Addictions Program with NL Health Services. I'm very happy to be able to offer you this session recorded for your awareness and listening. This session is offered also as part of our Wellness Wednesday series, which takes place on Wednesday evenings throughout the year. It is offered live leading into the holiday season, but we also are making it available to listen at your own pace and in your own home if you were unable to attend a live session or are only just finding this session for your awareness right now. Whatever the case might be, I'm happy to have you join me. We're going to be about an hour or maybe even a bit longer going through content of our session today. And I just want to acknowledge you taking the time out of this busy time of the year to do some self-care and maybe to take this time for reflection so that you can maybe experience a different holiday this year. We will be going through information today around different parts of coping with the holiday season. But before we begin that, I just want to make sure everyone is feeling welcome and feeling like this is a safe experience for you to join in. I do encourage you as you listen to feel free to pause the video to at times take notes or pause for some personal reflection as you go through. There will be quite a bit of information provided. Some of the information may be more applicable to your situation than others, but nevertheless, hopefully will all be helpful and informative for you. So again, just want to acknowledge that you're taking this time for yourself, and that is already a big start for changing your experience of the holiday season. In this session today, we will be looking at some different topics related to coping and being effective in coping with our own mental health as we enter into and experience the holidays. So today we'll be looking at what contributes to some of the struggles we might experience. We'll look at a list of different possibilities, but of course there may be other things that you might also identify that we don't necessarily speak to directly here today. But we just want to start the session with being able to mindfully acknowledge the different factors that are in play and might be affecting you as you enter into the holiday season. Then, as we move into the next section of our topic today, we're going to look at our values. And when we look at our values, it's going to be really helpful, hopefully, in being able to help you make some decisions around creating a vision of what you would like the holiday season to be like this year. As we'll talk about in this session, one of the problems we might experience is that we kind of go into the holiday season without a plan, without really doing any problem solving or thinking about in any structured way what we would like to experience over the holidays. And we might find we're being more reactive or going along with things just because they're what were done in the past or what other people want for the holidays. And we may not actually stop and think about what would we enjoy or what would we like to experience. So we're going to look at our values and helping us to create that vision. We're also going to look at, in terms of coping, some specific topics such as substance use in the holidays, how to cope with loneliness during the holidays. We're going to acknowledge the reality for many people that might be experiencing grief and loss. And we're also going to acknowledge that there is an awareness and a need to consider risk for suicide and the possibility for crisis support during the holidays. So these are some specific topics we'll touch on. And then at the end or towards the second part of the session, we will look at specific tools for coping. And so we're going to look at things like mindfulness, setting boundaries, and engaging in self-compassion and self-care. So all of these things hopefully will help us go back to that earlier part of the session around supporting our vision and creating a vision for the holidays. So as we look at this topic, I think it's an important place to start in acknowledging what contributes to some of the struggles that we experience during the holidays. When we offer our Wellness Wednesday sessions, as well as any of our other provincial mental health groups, we often talk about the difference between what we intellectually know and what we emotionally understand. So this topic or this question, what contributes to some of the struggles, is not probably one that you don't have any awareness of. You probably have thought about this, or probably as you're going about past holidays are aware of things that might be difficult or stressful for you. But just thinking about it in the moment or while we're struggling isn't the same as mindfully considering and identifying what might be some of our struggles. So as we look at some of these struggles, Sorry. I just want you to not just think about it with your mind, but also think about your emotional experience and you know, how you feel about some of these things and how they may personally impact you. So even as we do this, some people might find that there are some emotions that come up. Maybe you might be thinking back to past holidays that you've experienced and some of the difficulties that you endured, or you might be thinking about this specific holiday that we're entering into right now. And so as you do that, and as you move out of only thinking about it in your head, and you think about how it emotionally impacts you or how you've emotionally experienced holidays, as I said, this could bring up some emotions for people watching this video. And if that's the case, I'm just going to gently encourage you to pause the video. Maybe you might want to sit and allow yourself some time to acknowledge the feelings that you're having, acknowledging some of the difficulties that you've experienced. You can engage in some self-care, some of the tools that we're going to talk about later in the session. So feel free to take a break, you know, go and do some other things and come back to the video if that happens for you in this section or any other section of the video. And I'll also say if it brings up, you know, more intense emotions or more intense difficulty that you feel like it's a little bit hard to deal with, we often encourage people and let people know about one of our access options for mental health services, which is our Doorways clinics. So there are Doorways clinics available all across the province. So as you watch this or any of our other Wellness Wednesdays videos, we always encourage you to be aware of our Doorways clinics if you need some additional support to process anything that's shared here. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So I'm going to go through, and I'll apologize because my cough is lingering for quite a while. If you've listened to other videos, you might have heard me coughing in those too. So it's still lingering, so I apologize, and I'll try to minimize it, but just bear with me if I do have that cough coming up periodically. So just want to start with this question of what contributes to some of the struggles that we experience during the holidays. And you can, as we go through these points, just think about if you relate to any of them. You might also think about people in your life, if they may also be relating to these things, because one of the things that can happen as we are entering into the holiday season is that everyone can have their own personal triggers or struggles, and then we're interacting more, and there's a lot of heightened emotion and heightened interaction for some people. And so we're kind of interacting with other people who may be struggling, which then can also contribute to our struggles. So of course, this is primarily for you to listen to for yourself, but as you listen, you might also be thinking, oh yeah, I want to have a little bit of extra awareness that, you know, this person in my life or that friend or that family member is also going through some of this stuff too. And that might help you in some of your own coping. So one of the first things we want to talk about that can contribute to some of the struggles is increased time with family. And this might seem a little bit strange to some people, but the actual experience of spending extra time with family and maybe extended family can actually be difficult for many people. It doesn't even have to be in situations where there are complex or unhealthy family dynamics. That can certainly increase the struggles, but just the extra time and being around people socially, having larger gatherings, that can be stressful for some people. Some people, as you may realize, or maybe yourself, are not used to being around a lot of people a lot of the time. So when we have extra family gatherings and maybe are seeing relatives that we haven't seen for a long time, just that stimulation and activity in and of itself can be stressful for many people. This can also be magnified, of course, if you do have any complex family dynamics that maybe have been challenging throughout the year, and then the increased contact with family might activate those struggles even more at that time. So sometimes it could be a conflict with a family member. It could be a relative that may be challenging to be around for different reasons. There could be a history of trauma and abuse for some people in their families. So then at Christmas or at other holidays when we're around family, this can bring up some of those struggles and complex relationships. On the flip side, some people may have struggles because they're missing family and friends that they may not be able to be with. This can be connected to the third point of grief, but it also can exist even if there's not necessarily a grief or a person who's passed away, but sometimes it just might be that we are physically more distant. Family may be scattered at different places and they may not be able to be together. And so you might be feeling isolated and alone and lonely during the holiday times. Or there could be one specific family member that really is important to you, or a really close friend that is an integral part of your holiday season and your memories. And maybe that person or that friend is no longer here this year. Maybe they might be living in a different province, or maybe away for work. Or maybe family dynamics have changed and now that person has a new family and they're spending their Christmas more with other people. So sometimes for people, there are shifts and changes in family dynamics and friendships that might mean that the people you normally would have spent time with aren't available, and that might be difficult to adjust to. Of course, this can be connected to loss through grief and loss through death. And so when we experience holiday seasons, for sure, people who've experienced the loss of a loved one can be impacted greatly at this time of the year. It doesn't even have to be a loss that happened in this previous year. It can be a loss and a death that happened many years ago, but during the holidays, sometimes the grief surfaces and is more intense. So being able to acknowledge that you're grieving and that you're experiencing that loss and that impacts your experience of the holidays is really important and valid. The next point is around increased time socializing, which we kind of talked about with family, but also doesn't have to be specifically family. So it could be that there's more social gatherings, maybe in your workplace, maybe just with friends or activities you're involved in. There's certainly lots of get-togethers and meals and different types of things that are more busy and more frequent during the holiday season. So when we are more busy, we may not have the same amount of time to engage in self-care. We may not have the same amount of time to have like time to recharge our batteries. And we may just feel like we're constantly on the go and constantly having to be like chatty and friendly and make conversation. And some people thrive on that and it's very energizing, and other people might find that to get a little bit overwhelming. So that can be difficult during the holidays. Another thing that is very common for people to experience with as a struggle through the holiday season is the extra expenses that may be felt during this time. So it could go back to the socializing. Maybe there's eating out in restaurants more often. Maybe there's, you know, needing to buy an outfit for that social gathering. Those types of expenses might be higher or more than other times of the year. But then there's also often an expectation or a pressure that we might feel to buy gifts for people and spend more money than we really want to or that we can afford. So that's that pressure to like give more than we can or spend more than we can sometimes is a really a big thing that people might experience. And we'll talk about later in the session some ways that we can cope with that pressure or that sense of the thoughts that we might have our own self that we should do these things and how we can deal with that. So we do know that sometimes people go significantly in debt through the holiday season and may spend a lot of the year trying to get out of that debt. And sometimes people don't actually get out of that debt and they carry it for a long time. So this can be very stressful for people. We already briefly talked about in other points the idea of feeling lonely, but just to acknowledge it as a specific and you know, important piece of recognition during the holiday season. It ties into this next couple of points on the slide, which we can get into comparison with others and the discrepancy between the wants and wishes versus the reality. So sometimes when we are in the holiday season, we may notice our sense of feeling alone more often because we may be looking at all these images, perhaps on social media, just maybe hearing through other people like what they're doing and who they're with, or thinking about the image of like Christmas Day and people being surrounded by family. And so when we think about perhaps our own reality, if it doesn't match up to those images that we're seeing from other people, we can experience a heightened sense of loneliness. And the reality is that for many people, they may not have huge extended families or big circles of friends, and they may be alone more frequently during the holiday season because perhaps some of the people in their life are more busy. So that can increase and be a reality for some people that alone time might be even more frequent. So feelings of loneliness can be highlighted and magnified during the holiday season. And again, connected to that, but also can be its own separate issue and a separate situation, can be the behavior we all can engage in at times, which is comparison to others. So this can be on many different levels. It could be around like, I don't have as many people, I'm more isolated and alone, I feel lonely during the holidays. It can also be around financial things, like I don't have enough money or as much money as other people have. It could be comparison to even our own past experiences of holidays that we might have found more enjoyable, or that type of thing. So the comparison and thinking that, and the thoughts that come with comparison, that we're not worthy, or we're not lovable, or we're not valuable, or our life is not the way it should be or the way we want it to be, can add to the struggle. Which is also the next point about the discrepancy between what we want or what we wish our holiday season could be like and what the reality is. So this could tie back to all the points that we've covered. Perhaps we, wish we had a different type of family dynamic, or we wish we had more close friendships, or we wish we had more money, or we might wish that we could just go away and not have to be a part of the holidays overall. And so sometimes what we would like it to be like and what the reality actually is are not the same. And so this can really lead to a struggle. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed with responsibilities and their to-do list during the holidays, and they just wish that things could be more simple and there wouldn't be so much, things to do. And they might feel like that reality is hard to actualize. So that can be a big discrepancy that can cause some struggle. The next point around highlighting issues that are present all year in a more focused way. So again, in our society, when we look at the holiday season, there is a lot of expectation or images around, what the holiday season is supposed to be like. And I'm using kind of air quotes, I guess, around supposed to be like, because this is all fabricated, of course, and very few of us have that hallmark reality picture in our own lives. But nevertheless, when we do experience or enter into the holiday season and we think about our own reality, some of the things that we're dealing with all year long feel magnified and feel more intense. So if we have, challenging relationships with family, they can feel more heightened. If we have mental health issues that we've been dealing with, they can feel more intense and triggered. If we have substance use issues, they can be magnified as well during the holiday season. If we're struggling with feelings of worthiness and value and worth, if we feel isolated and alone, or that, again, our holidays are not the way we'd like them to be, those feelings can be increased. So these things are really important to acknowledge, that there may be issues that are happening throughout the year, but when it comes to the holiday season, they feel even bigger because we feel like our reality of our struggle doesn't match with the fantasy or the image of what we think we're supposed to be feeling. And in mental health overall, this can be a really big factor to contribute to struggles. This concept of like the way things should be, and this feeling of like there's something wrong with us because that is not our reality. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of how to cope. And one last point, and certainly not the last for sure, but you might think of some other things that can be contributing to your struggles, is that we may enter into the holiday season with memories of past holidays that were painful or traumatic. So for many people, unlike that, again, hallmark image, many people have experienced the holidays as actually some of the most painful times of the year. Where there may be heightened drinking, heightened conflict, heightened sense of inadequacy, and that might be going back into their childhood. So when they enter into the holidays, even as an adult, those past memories may be re-experienced or remembered, and may even just in our body be activated so that we feel anxious and uncomfortable as we approach the holidays. So if any of you have experienced those past painful holiday seasons, just know that it will be understandable for you to feel that being triggered and activated during current holidays. There are, again, tools and strategies that we can use to cope with that, and we'll talk about those as we go through the session. So before we move on to our next piece, I do encourage you to just pause the video for a moment and just think about your own reality. What are some of the things that you may be dealing with, some of the things that may be happening in your life that could be contributing to you having some difficulty as you enter into this holiday season? It could be things that I've outlined or mentioned on these slides, but there could be something else that hasn't been mentioned. So I just want you to take a moment, and if you feel like you would be willing to try this, just write this down on a piece of paper. You can just do a little list. It doesn't have to be anything complex or any fancy writing, but sometimes when we write things down on paper, it helps us to actually acknowledge the reality and the presence of these struggles in a way that's not just kind of in passing as we're doing something else. And this might sound like a bit strange to do, like why would we sit and think about the struggles? But sometimes if we don't mindfully acknowledge what we're dealing with, we don't actually then mindfully engage in coping. So sometimes people are trying to rush to not think about what's going wrong or what they're struggling with. But we actually encourage people to sit and just be aware of and acknowledge things so that they can be more clear about what's happening. And then we can mindfully use tools to cope with that. So just feel free to do that pause now. So now we're going to move on into an awareness of, or a way to look at those things that could be struggles. And we want to look at them in two broad ways. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but there are two different ways we can look at triggers for struggles. One of those areas is things that are out of our control, and the other ones are things that are in our control. So what happens when we don't recognize the difference between things that are in our control or out of our control is that we may be exerting a lot of energy and effort trying to change things that we cannot change. And what happens when we do that is that we're depleting our energy with no effective outcome. So we talk about in mental health skills and coping about doing things that are effective. All of us are doing the best that we can with what we have, trying to cope with our day-to-day life. But sometimes if we don't have the right tools, or we use the right tools in the wrong way or in the wrong place, we don't get any positive results. And so we can, as I said, be depleting our energy, putting a lot of effort into something, and it doesn't really help us in the long run. So when we're doing things that are about trying to change the past or change the future, or if we're trying to change other people's actions or other people's thoughts, or what's happening around us, or what other people think of us, or how other people take care of themselves, we are not doing using our skills effectively because we cannot change those things. We cannot change things outside of our own self. We can't change the thoughts, behaviors, actions, reactions, responses of other people. What we can control, though, is our own thoughts and actions, our own choices around how we handle our challenges, what we give our energy to, the boundaries that we set, and how we speak to ourselves. So we really want to put our effort into the things that we do have control over and making changes and engaging in behaviors that help us to maximize that. And when it does come to things that are out of our control, there is a strategy that we can use that I'm going to cover in a couple of minutes that's called radical acceptance. So it's helpful to be able to cope with the things that are out of our control. So I guess to kind of clear up that point, when there are things that are out of our control that we cannot change, the past, the future, others, all those examples I just gave, what we do have the ability to control, though, is how we cope with those things. So how do I cope with the things that are happening around me? How do I cope with the actions of other people? How do I cope with other people not engaging in healthy behaviors or not treating me the way that I think I should be treated? How do I cope with that? That is in our control. And that's what we want to maximize our energy on. So in terms of coping with the holidays, we want to be able, one of the first places we want to be able to start laying a foundation is connecting with our own goals and values. and determining what we want the holiday season to look like. And when we're doing that, we want to work with the reality of what is. So what we mean by working with the reality of what is exactly back to that slide of what we can't control. So we can't, for example, say, well, I want to make the holidays so that Uncle so-and-so doesn't drink and doesn't show up at a house party, really, really intoxicated and, engaging in activities or behaviors that are, upsetting to everybody. We can't change that Uncle so-and-so is maybe going to drink over the holidays, but we can change some of how we might address that situation of, maybe him or her or that person coming and disrupting a holiday party. So we want to look at what's within our control and working with the reality of what is. We don't, as much as it would be nice to be able to, influence or change things that are not working, we don't have that ability to do that. So we want to be able to work with the facts of reality. And so in that, we need to look at what are our goals and our values. So we're going to do an activity now to give you some time to reflect on your goals and your values. And so what I'd like you to think about is to visualize the upcoming holiday season. And we're into the days that are leading up to Christmas and to Christmas Day itself, and even the days after Christmas, the days in between Christmas and New Year's. And just imagine if there are any particular events or situations that you are especially impacted by. So going back to that list of triggers, are there specific things that you are struggling with, that you're anxious about, that you are anticipating, that are overwhelming for you? Is it that the holidays as a whole make you feel overwhelmed, or are there specific things that have happened in the past or you're anticipating happening this year? So take a moment and slow things down and notice these specific situations, the people or the events or the expectations that may cause you more stress. I'm just going to pause and let you imagine that and walk around in your mind, imagining these things that might be stressful for you. And now I'd like you to take a breath, take a reset, and visualize the holidays again. And now visualize how you would like to feel. What would you like to feel before the holidays start, during the holidays, and after the holidays are over? In visualizing what you'd like to feel and experience, what's within your control? Remembering that we cannot control others, we cannot change the facts of reality, but we can control how we handle those things and how we show up. So how would you like to show up? How would you like to handle the people and events and situations that may arise? If you were being the person that you want to be and acting in a way, if you didn't have the limitations or the fears of, well, people are not going to like it, or this is going to upset somebody, or, I'm not sure if I know how to do that. If you don't have those limitations, how would you like to handle things? How would you like to show up? What's important to you? You can ask yourself, who do I want to be in the reality of what is? And when Christmas is over and done with this year, what would I like to be able to say about how I went through these days? If you could choose one or two words or qualities that you'd like to have as your compass or your guide during the holidays, what might they be? What is most important to you? So for example, you might say, I want to embody, or I want to embrace confidence, or I want to embrace simplicity, or I want to embrace being in the moment. I want to embrace peace. What are some of the things, how you would like to act or how you'd like to show up, even within the reality of some of the stressful things that may be beyond your control? So if you can identify a couple of words, you could even just write those down now just to hold on to them and so you don't forget them. So this would be an example of your values. So some values that might be helpful, there's no right or wrong values, of course. Any value or any word that you pick is valid. We do try to encourage you to pick a word or a value that is more of a behavior or a way you can act. So for example, if you say you want to value family over the holidays, well, what is it about that? Like, is it that you want to embrace being loving or patient? Or do you want to value like contribution or support? So those words are more of an action word than family, which would be more of like an object that you're valuing. We want to identify values or qualities that we can put into action as we go into the holiday season. So I'm going to use an example of being presence, being present in the moment, being fully aware and being like kind of mindfully in the present moment. We're going to talk about mindfulness a bit more later. So if I identify that as something that's a value for me and I want to bring that into how I cope, because one of the things that happens with the holiday season is that we're often very scattered and overwhelmed. We're kind of like, in 10 places at once. So when we can embody and embrace presence, being present in each activity, each moment as it happens, then that can help us to deal with the struggles that we might have. So when we look at this and we look at the behaviors or the things that are important to us, this image here is called a choice point model, which helps us to look at what happens when we get pulled into the struggles and feel powerless or feel like after the fact, we look at it and say, oh, that wasn't how I want to handle that situation, or that didn't feel so good, or that kind of, backfired on me and I ended up like in an even worse outcome than what I anticipated. So this model here called choice point model is a way that we can look at how we can change that action of getting like on the left, we call it being hooked. So when we are hooked by situations, all those triggers we talked about earlier, often what happens for many of us if we don't act intentionally or with awareness is we get pulled into behaviors and thoughts and responses that are ineffective, that don't lead us towards what's important to us. So we have two directions here. We have the red hook direction, and we have the green unhook direction. And when it says towards, it means we're moving towards being the person we want to be and living the values that are important to us. When it says away, we are moving away from the person we want to be, and we're engaging in behaviors, thoughts, reactions that are not helpful and lead us away from the life we want to be living. So if we think about, again, that vision of what we would like the holiday season to be like, things that we can do to help us move closer towards that vision would be towards moves, and things that take us away from that would be away moves. So in the middle here, you can kind of imagine, what you had pictured for your holiday season back in that earlier visualizing activity. So the thoughts, the situations, and the feelings that pull us into being triggered are constantly happening. They're happening all through the day, all through the year. But as we talked about in the first bit of the session, some of these triggers are heightened or they are specific to the holidays. And so as we're going about even now our days, and we might see commercials on TV about like, what we should be buying, or, commercials that portray all these happy families, or we're looking at social media, or we're looking at our bank account, or we're, getting the invite to go to that relative's place for the Boxing Day dinner. And we're thinking, gosh, I really don't want to go this year. These are all trigger points and choice points in experiences that we have. So if I'm gonna use an example about a family get together. And so if we have a yearly family get together, and when we go, we are around family that maybe there's some unhealthy dynamics happening. that could be, you know, people arguing, could be that these two relatives, you know, haven't spoken for the last 5 years and now they're in the room together. It could be a family member, like I said earlier, who's drinking too much. It could be that relative that kind of starts talking about politics and puts people on edge. Could be anything that is happening in your family dynamics or friend groups. So we get the invitation, and we know that it's happening again this year. So that can be a choice point. So if we get hooked into things like, you know, I have no choice, I have to go, this is going to be horrible, and we start to like get maybe a body reaction to the thoughts of going, we may start to feel like a headache coming on or muscle tension, even nausea or upset stomach. We may start to have trouble sleeping, anticipating this event coming up. These are all actions of being hooked into past patterns or feeling like we don't have any choice in how to cope. So if I have my goal of being present in the moment, so I would even be present in that point of like paying attention to how I'm feeling as I think about going to this family get together. And so every time I think about it, I have a choice, like, do I, you know, maybe it's not happening for 2 weeks and I'm thinking about it today and having all these body reactions coming, and I'm starting to visualize how it's going to go this year and reliving things that happened last year. These are all things that are ineffective coping. They're all normal, natural things that we all do. We don't have to feel ashamed about it, but we can notice that this is what we're doing and say, how do I be present in this moment? In this moment, I'm not at that family get together. Maybe I'm just sitting on my sofa having a cup of tea. So how can I be present here now when I'm having this cup of tea and not be 2 weeks ahead into something that's not happening right now? Maybe I can notice what's happening in my body and I can do some breathing exercises to help me cope. Maybe I can actually like have the thought, do I really have to go to this family get together just because it's been the norm for the last 5 or 10 years? Like, do I actually have to go, or is there a choice I have here? And even if we still choose to go, we can still recognize that there is a choice, and that gives us a sense of some power in our life and some ability that we can not feel like we're a victim or powerless over things. So these are things that we can think about in terms of like, how do I want to act, or how do I want to handle the trigger that's happening? What are things that are going to help me be the person that I want to be, or what are some of the ineffective things that I do to cope that may lead me down an unhealthy path in terms of my coping? And of course, the difficult thing of this, like lots of times when we talk about mental health strategies, we often will say in our groups that, you know, sometimes the concepts are simple to understand, but it's the actual doing of the behaviors that is hard. And so what makes it hard is that, you know, it's not just like one, you know, incident or one thing, you know, and then we have weeks and there's another thing. We all are having like these choice points multiple times a day. Sometimes they're easier choice points and we have like good skills and we're able to move towards our values, but other things, you know, are harder to do. And so we often are feeling like, you know, dealing with one situation on top of another situation on top of another situation. And we might just feel like we're, you know, having difficulty keeping up with all the triggers and all the choices. And that's again, like where we can even just notice that, like, so that might lead to a new choice point of feeling overwhelmed. And so when we feel overwhelmed, then we do other behaviors that might lead us away from being the person we want to be. And so trying as much as possible within the reality of what is, to carve out pockets of time to like reconnect and regroup with yourself. Another thing we talk about a lot is not having unrealistic or too high expectations. So as you think about what you'd like your holiday season to be like, you may not be able to accomplish all of that today or for this year. You can probably try to choose 1 or 2 things that are realistic to start with and move towards just those things and not try to fix all of it at once. So I'm going to, there's going to be a video that comes up next. I'm going to skip the video because I pretty well went through the whole thing in the explanation here. So if it starts, it might take me a second to move along to the next slide. So just bear with me for a second. Oh, no, it went ahead. All right. Okay. So when we go back to like what we want the holiday season to be like, you can compare the 2 versions between what you're expecting or what you're fearing it to be like versus the version of the holidays you want it to be like. And so compare this version of the holidays to what is more likely to happen if you do not make any changes. So where are the differences, and which of the differences do you feel able to do something about? So consider starting with just one or two, like I just said, so your goals are realistic. So when we are wanting to go to that choice point, we want to be saying yes to activities that align with our values and our priorities. So when we think about the vision that we want to move towards, we're going to say yes to things that fit with that. And we're going to choose to be around people that we enjoy being around. We're going to be open to creating new traditions and memories. We're going to be open to allowing our feelings, whatever they might be. And we might also be saying yes to quiet time to recharge and to relax and to regroup around this vision that we want to create. We also are going to be looking at so the tool of radical acceptance, which I mentioned earlier, around the things that we can't control. So we're going to be trying to say no to controlling or trying to fix things that are beyond our control. And so radical acceptance, I'm going to say again, is another one of those tools that sounds simple in explanation, but the actual doing of it can be quite challenging for many of us because it's really about working with things that we can't change. And a lot of us have difficulty with that because we can look at other situations or other people and just say like, well, if that person could, just stop talking about that topic, or if this person would just not yell, or if this person would, do their share of the work, or if this person would not have expectations we have to spend $100 on a gift that I can't afford. So we can easily see how like other people, if they could just change, things would be simpler for us. But we've talked about that we can't change other people. So radical acceptance is working with the reality of what is, and it's dealing with the facts of a situation. When we talk about radical acceptance, we want to stress that it's not about liking the reality or that the reality has to be fair or that it is the way, we want it to be. It's just simply, it is the reality. So this little slide here just has a more simple example, but this is common for us in Newfoundland when it comes to weather. We really can get caught up in our experiences of like rainy days, windy days, snowy days, different kinds of, unpleasant weather we might feel is unpleasant. And so we get kind of frustrated and we get stuck in I don't like it. I wish it wasn't rainy. My day would be better if it wasn't rainy. My day is ruined. Every day is like this. Why does it always rain when I want it to be sunny? And so that's the opposite of radical acceptance. That's fighting reality, getting focused on wishing that things could be different, and even feeling that life is not fair because this is the way it is. Whereas radical acceptance is saying, okay, it is raining. It is what it is. I don't have to like that it's raining. Yes, it does affect my day, but I'm gonna put on good rain clothes and I'm gonna go do the things I need to do despite the fact that it's raining. Or maybe I'm gonna say, well, I'm gonna postpone those chores or those outings I had to do today, and I'm just gonna cozy up at home and wait till tomorrow, and hopefully the weather will be better. So it's working with the facts, and it's kind of leads to an experience where we do acknowledge that life is far from perfect and that we do have struggles, but we work with the reality of those struggles and we try to cope with it the best way we can. So if we think about a more complex situation, if we use an example that does come up for many people around the holidays, could be around substance use. Whether you yourself maybe have had some experiences with struggles with substance use, or you may have a family member who has difficulty with substance use. If we say things like, well, they shouldn't drink, or, they're ruining Christmas, or we try to stop a person from drinking, or we, try to control the outcomes of things, often we don't have any success at those things. But if we say, okay, this person has a problem with drinking, so how do I work with that reality? How do I interact with this person around the holidays in a way that I can be as healthy as possible? So it might mean that instead of inviting a person over for an evening meal where there'd be normally some drinks or some wine, maybe you have brunch together where it's not as likely to have alcohol involved. Or maybe you have like options for non-alcohol drinks available. It could be that you make a decision that you're not going to be around a person at certain times of the holidays because there is that drinking happening, and maybe you've made a choice that this is not something I can handle right now. Or maybe you really work on your coping skills yourself and how to manage your own reactions. And you might bring a support person along with you, or you might say, I'm going to go, but I'm going to allow myself to leave early before it gets really, more stressful and challenging for me. So it's not denying the reality of what might happen, but it's saying, how can I make a plan so I can be as healthy as possible in dealing with a situation that might come up. So you can think about that for any of those out of your control situations that may be on your plate for Christmas or holidays. And think about, how can I work with the reality? If I can acknowledge that this is something that's likely to happen, what can I do to try to be as healthy as possible in coping with this situation? And then again, like, it gets into being able to open up your mind to different possibilities yourself. And it might also mean that sometimes we have an opportunity to learn some additional coping skills for ourselves, which again, we'll get into in another bit in this presentation. So just to kind of clue up what radical acceptance is, it's acknowledging what's real. It's not fighting the facts. It's making space for what comes next. It allows for a reduction in suffering, and allows you to reclaim your energy and your ability to make impact and have influence over things. When we talk about reducing your suffering, it doesn't mean that you don't have any struggle or pain. But one of the phrases that's often used in mindfulness and around radical acceptance is the phrase, pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. So in life, we all experience pain, but sometimes we add to that pain because we don't have the skills or the knowledge or the tools to know how to work with reality. And when we fight reality, when we get stuck in like, this is not the way it should be, or this is not fair, then we add to our pain and it leads to increased suffering. So again, this is really challenging at times to put into action, because it sometimes means really dealing with very complex and very painful situations. Radical acceptance does not mean that we agree with situations or we approve of them. It does not mean we're giving up or being passive. In fact, it's the opposite. It can feel quite empowering to start to work with reality. It does not mean we have to forgive people who have hurt us or have done things to us that have been painful or not healthy. It's not about toxic positivity. In fact, again, it's the opposite, like toxic positivity, like, oh, I'm okay and everything's okay and it doesn't bother me. But it's the opposite. Actually, this is not okay. This does hurt me, and what am I going to do about it? It doesn't also enable harmful behavior. It does, again, give us more power and agency to face harmful behavior and say, how am I going to cope with this? What will be most healthy for me? So you can think about in your own life, and back to the struggles that you identified, if there are things there that are beyond your control, what would it be like to practice radical acceptance for those things, to say, this is the reality, and how can I cope with this reality? What are my options in dealing with this in as healthy a way as I possibly can right now? The last point I'll make about radical acceptance is that it's not something we do once and then it's done forever. So radical acceptance is a thing at that choice point model where we get faced with triggers over and over and over again. And every time we're faced with it, we can choose, do I fight this reality and wish that it was different? Or do I face it and try to use strategies to cope? So if we are trying to, for example, if we're trying to work on radically accepting that many of our Christmases have been filled with pain because of, maybe unhealthy or even abusive family dynamics, working with that reality, I say, I'm going to radically accept that this is how my family interacts through the year and at Christmas time. How am I going to cope with the reality that my family, the dynamics are unhealthy and not safe for me? And again, there's different options or different choices people might make. So when we do that, it doesn't mean that we've done that once and it's over and we never have to think about it again. Every time we have to think about or possibly have to interact with our family, we kind of circle back and we can slip back into fighting reality or ignoring reality, or we can choose again, say, okay, here it is again. I have another get together coming, or I'm thinking about the past and reliving past experiences. How do I work with the reality that I was impacted and I am impacted by my family dynamics during the holidays? So it's an ongoing journey, and we can make a choice every time to work with reality and cope to the best of our ability with the facts, or we can do what's called willfulness, where we fight reality and say, this is not fair, this is not right. That might be very well true that it's not fair or right, but that doesn't give us any solutions then. So you can think about how that might be. So you can pause the video here again if you like, because that's a lot. That's a lot of information around radical acceptance and just being able to process if there are any places in your coping for the holidays that radical acceptance might be helpful for you. So feel free to pause, and if you want to just write down some places where you might have really difficult realities or things that are beyond your control, and just maybe imagine what it would be like to try to practice radical acceptance for those situations. So I'm just going to pause for a second here in case you want to pause the video and then restart it. So I'm going to move into now a couple of those specific topics that might be triggers or struggles for some people, and then we'll move into some coping strategies. So substance use in the holidays, I've already referenced a few times as an example. It is a very common struggle. Newfoundland and Labrador has very high rates of alcohol and drug use and gambling. So it does say substance use, but also can include other types of addictions too. And sometimes these behaviors increase during the holiday season because there's a lot more socializing, there's a lot more alcohol being available, and there can be sometimes even for adults like some implied pressure to engage in drinking during the holiday season. This is hard for people who may, have problems with alcohol. It's also, or drugs, or gambling. It's also hard for family members because they are on heightened eggshells and heightened stress, like kind of anticipating all the different situations. It's also really hard for people who may be in recovery for substance use. So just to kind of identify, this is something that many of us, or maybe even most of us, are impacted by to some degree during the holiday season. So there are some kind of general facts and guidelines. Again, some of this might not be anything new for people, but I'm going to always encourage you to think about this like more personally, and think about, if any of these things might be helpful for you. You cannot make other people make these decisions, but you might want to think about, is there any of this helpful for you? And also, if you're hosting socials, you might want to think about how you can support some of these things happening. So one of the first and probably most obvious things would be to aim to drink less. Any reduction in alcohol use helps to lower the health risks. Every little bit counts. So if normally you go to a social and you drink a bottle of wine, could you maybe share that bottle of wine with somebody else? Or if you maybe mix your drinks a bit stronger, could you like make them with less mix? Or could you, maybe have a glass of water or just a soft drink in between alcohol drinks? So anything you can do to reduce the amounts is helpful. You also overall can take days off from alcohol or drug use. So being mindful that, if you have a social, say on a Friday night, that maybe you might mindfully choose to not engage in any substance use, for the rest of the week till the following weekend. You also can choose alcohol-free or lower alcohol drinks, because there are certainly drinks with different varying amounts of alcohol in them. Even again as adults, sometimes it's helpful to have drinks that you are like again, could be ginger ale or it could be whatever. And people don't necessarily need to know if you're having alcohol or not, because there can be, you know, a bit of pressure that can happen at social gatherings, saying like, oh, come on, have another drink, or what's wrong with you? And, you know, adults also experience this. We think about it as a teenage thing, but it's very common in our culture amongst adults for a little bit of that pressure, or even a lot of that pressure to happen. When you do go out and have social experiences and you are having a few drinks, to try to be mindful about drinking slowly and set your limits in advance. So you're keeping track of, like, if you have a limit of like 2 drinks or 3 drinks or 4, you know, keep track of what you're at and be aware. I already mentioned to drink water, possibly in between or substitute against something else. And also, it's just harm reduction to make sure you eat before you use alcohol or other drugs, and also to have something to eat like during the evening or during the social that you're getting together with. Around drug use, if you use other types of drugs, using all new supplies every time. You can get free supplies in specifically the St. John's area. You can get them from Safe Works Access Program, but there are places across the province where you can get safe supplies. And even if you live outside of St. John's, you can probably contact Safe Work Access Program, SWAP it's called for short, and find out how you might be able to get supplies in your area. We want to plan for safe rides home or stay the night. You know, really want to emphasize that any alcohol use and driving is not safe, and we want to keep our roads safe. Storing alcohol and drugs safely away from kids and teens and even animals, so making sure your supplies are not accessible. And when you're pregnant or breastfeeding, no alcohol or drug use is the safest option. If you are around people, and this is not like, this is probably for everybody at this point, because, you know, drugs are so widely used and available in many of our communities. Having access to naloxone and letting other people know you have it. You never know when it might be needed. Being aware that mixing drugs increases the risk. And if you are using drugs alone, there is this number that you can call, because you know, this can help prevent overdoses. So if you call this number, you can have someone be with you while you're using, so that they can respond if there's any emergency. So overall, we want to support people to be safe and to know what ways they can do to make sure that that's safe. This is stuff from Canada around standard drinks, or what's helpful, or what's the safe amount of drinking. So this came out fairly recently, these new standards, and it's really helpful for people to know, because in Newfoundland, our tolerance for alcohol use is fairly high in terms of like what's socially acceptable. So, you know, it's seen to be kind of normal for people to, you know, sit and drink a dozen beer, and that's not seen as a concern among some people. But to know that these limits are what's recommended for people around safe use, and what the risks are as we increase our use. So 2 standard drinks or less a week is when you're likely to avoid alcohol-related consequences for yourself and others. When we get up to 3 to 6 drinks per week, you develop a more risk for cancer and other types of issues. 7 or more drinks per week, you risk heart disease and stroke, more high risk for heart disease and stroke. And each drink after that increases the risk for other alcohol-related consequences. So the numbers for safe use are fairly low, and again, it's not probably commonly perceived in Newfoundland and Labrador. So here it is again in this kind of visual format, just showing the increased risk. So when we're looking at people who are in recovery, specifically during the holidays, I want to give a special note of attention to encourage people to make a plan for how they're going to cope with all these different situations of people, places, and things that could be triggers to use. Certainly have your supports like lined up in your mind, have phone numbers available, have people you can reach out to any time of the day or night if you're struggling. Please don't feel like you have to deal with it on your own. And also knowing that after the holidays, like in January, is also high risk time, because a lot of people make a big plan for the actual holiday season, And then there's like this, you know, sense of relief, or maybe like not as much planning for after. And so relapses are fairly frequent after the actual holidays are over. So being able to reach out to your supports is really, really important. Maybe if you are involved in AA or NA or any self-help group, or if you go to any meetings, maybe increasing your meetings during this time, and again, after the holidays too. So now just some focused look at feeling lonely during the holidays. So loneliness is a really common feeling, as we talked about earlier in this session. And so being able to understand that this is, while we feel very alone, and that's part of loneliness, it's also not only an individual thing. It's a bit of a societal and a community thing too. So loneliness that we might feel all through the year can be heightened and magnified during the holiday season. We really want to explore what's within our control. And also, if we are recognizing that we're lonely this year, we also can take it as a motivator through the coming year, not only at Christmas time, but to say, how do I make changes in my life so that maybe next year I can have some things be different in my life, so that loneliness is not so big for me. We also want to explore how we can take care of ourselves and address our loneliness during the holiday season. So we can think about spending time with other people, finding ways to connect with others. There are often community events that are happening, public things that are available to anybody. There could be things related to your community organizations, your town councils, just with neighbors. So being open to going out of your comfort zone to find ways to connect. For people that you do have in your life, maybe again asking or prioritizing reaching out, you know, scheduling phone calls, scheduling visits, being open to having a chat. Sometimes when we're lonely, we tend to add to it by withdrawing our own self and thinking that nobody really wants to connect with us or nobody's thinking about us, but they don't often know. And we have this regularly when we do our treatment groups and we talk about the importance of relationships. People often do some reflection, say, yeah, I know that I haven't called, you know, my friends for a while either. And they can say like, well, maybe they think I'm busy, or maybe they think I don't want to be with them. We tend to often see things like, you know, obviously through our own eyes, and see, most of us default to seeing ourselves more harshly than anybody else does. And so we tend to have more often the thought like nobody cares about me, or people don't want to be around me, or people are not thinking about me. But when we often check the facts, this is not really true. And it's just that people are busy, or people might think that we're busy too. And so actually doing the reaching out and trying to make connections is really helpful. We also can reach out to give. Like, so sometimes one of the greatest ways we can address our own loneliness is to try to help somebody else. So again, we can look to our community organizations, or look to see like, you know, who might be in need that we might be able to do something for and give back, and that can help us feel less lonely. And if you are here and you don't maybe relate to the loneliness for yourself, you may want to just kind of pause and think about, is there anybody in your friend circle or your family or your community that you might know could be feeling a little bit lonely this season, and maybe think about, is there something you could do to reach out to them? So yeah, reach out to other people, even if it's with a phone call or just a check-in or an invitation to an activity, and think about people who might be lonely. If there's seniors in your community or in your neighborhood or in your family that might feel a little bit distance from others, think about if you can fit in a short visit or contact with them. So it's about having some mindful awareness about what we might be able to do, and kind of checking in with our thoughts and our own limiting thinking about what might prevent us from reaching out to some of the possible contacts and supports that we might have. It's not something that's probably going to be like, you know, fixed 100%, you know, quickly, but it's the point again that maybe if you notice you're lonely this Christmas, that maybe there's some things you can do to make it change through the coming year, so that next year can be different for you. We also want to just mindfully mention coping with grief and loss a little bit further. So as I mentioned earlier, there could be a heightened sense of loss around the holidays. Doesn't even have to be from a recent death. It, when we have lost a loved one, the grief is an ongoing journey. It doesn't stop at a certain point. And the holiday season can be a time when people, the missing of the loved ones can be even more heightened and more intense. So just part of it is being able to normalize that and know that that's understandable, and it's an indicator of how much that person meant to you and how much love they had for you and you had for them. So it's very painful, but it also is normal, and it's part of having those loving relationships. So we can think about how can we honor our loved ones through the holiday season. Some people find it helpful to have like specific rituals or things that they might do. For example, they might have a special Christmas ornament that they put on the tree in memory of someone who's no longer here. Or they may have an activity they do through the holidays that they maybe remember their loved one while they're doing it. It's also helpful to think about creating new traditions. So there might be a space or a void around traditions that you had with that loved one, and we can't always replace things directly, but maybe it's like saying that there's some new things that we can bring into our life, to not fill the space or replace the person, but to allow ourselves to move forward and give ourselves permission that we can still enjoy the holiday season, even though we're grieving. So the grief doesn't get pushed aside or ignored. It's there, but it's also that it's okay to be happy and enjoy the holidays still. And if needed, you can seek supports. There is a pastoral care in St. John's region does do a virtual grieving through the holiday session. I think that it has been, may have happened already, depending on when you watch this video. So this video is going to be available, obviously, for, in the future years. So it'll be recorded and available. So if it's earlier in the season, you can email the grief and bereavement at nlhealthservices.ca, or you can call this number and just see if their session has happened. But it's a specific grief session for the holidays that's available, and it's really valuable to attend if this is something, especially if it's a fresher grief, but doesn't mean that you can't attend if it's been a grief that happened in the past and you're still noticing that the feelings are coming up intensely. It's a really helpful session to attend. And on the note of crisis support and suicide prevention, we do want to acknowledge again that because the holidays can be so painful and there can be so much struggle through the holiday season, that for some people there can be, heightened sense of crisis. And unfortunately, some people are struggling to the point that they may have thoughts of suicide or suicide attempts. So we want to just encourage people to be aware of the warning signs of suicidal ideation. Basically any red flags that you feel, any gut instinct that you feel, if you're worried about someone, you can pay attention to that. And it's okay if you're worried about someone to actually express that worry directly. There are people, sometimes people might think that, well, if I bring it up, then that's going to make it more likely this person might, act on those thoughts, but that's not the case. So it's really helpful to actually have direct conversations. Say, like, I'm worried about you. I'm wondering, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about suicide? And actually ask direct questions. If you have concern about somebody's safety, whether they admit to having thoughts of suicide or being in crisis, or whether they deny it but you still really feel, then you can reach out to supports. One of the things you could do probably most easily across the province is to call 811 and talk through with a trained professional like what the situation is and what your options are. Some of the options might vary from place to place in the province. Some places have crisis response, mobile crisis response teams. Some places would be meaning going to the hospital. So there's different options in different areas. So by all means, you can feel free to present with the person at your local emergency room. You can also call 811 if you need a bit of support to figure out what your options are. But the overall message is to know that it is okay to talk with people and express concern, and just to trust your instincts if you are feeling worried about someone. So now we're going to move into some of the coping strategies to manage all these triggers that we've talked about and all these struggles. So if you want to, again, take a pause here and take a little break before you come back and watch these coping strategies, feel free to do that. This next section is going to be looking at how we can cope with these struggles in an effective way, where we can feel like we are approaching and dealing with things in ways that are going to be helpful. So just feel free to take that pause, and I'll stop for a second and then you can come back. So I've talked about mindfulness a little bit already several times in just passing around how we might cope. So when we think about all the triggers and all the struggles that might be happening for people through the holiday season, one of the most common things that people feel is overwhelm. And also people are often confused or not sure how they're feeling or why they're struggling or what's going on with them. Mindfulness is a really core tool and skill that we talk about in mental health treatment quite regularly because it is very impactful. And in fact, it's kind of like a foundation for any other skills that we would teach or learn or use in mental health. So mindfulness, I'm going to show a little quick video to just begin the consideration of what mindfulness is, and then we'll talk about it some more and how it could be helpful during the holidays. And we got a little commercial here, so I'll skip it as soon as I can. Another one coming. Okay. Here we go with the video.
As we get older, more and more of what we do in everyday life, we do on automatic pilot. We've done these tasks, these activities, these routines so many times, we take them for granted. We don't have to really focus on what we're doing. We don't have to put our attention into it. The bright side of this is that while I'm doing these activities, I don't have to put my mental energy into them, so I can put my mental energy into other things. I can think about other things. I can put my attention on other things that I consider to be more important or more interesting. But there's a dark side to this. The dark side is that basically the more I give my day over to operating on automatic pilot, the more I miss out on. There are all sorts of things happening in my everyday life that I just don't appreciate. For example, let's look at what I just missed out on in making this cup of tea. So I just picked a simple example of making a cup of tea. But what would happen if we applied that principle to all of those things we do on a daily basis, that we do on automatic pilot? We do them unconsciously. We do them in a distracted, unfocused way. We do them without really paying attention, without really engaging in what we're doing. How much richer, fuller would our lives be if we were to get better at actually engaging fully in what we're doing?
So that video with Russ Harris explains a little bit of what mindfulness looks like. I'm going to expand a little bit on some of the points in this video to help you think about how this could be helpful through the holiday season and all through the year. We do have a specific session available on mindfulness. So if this is a topic that you'd like to explore a little bit further, then you might want to find that specific mindfulness video and watch that one at some point as well. So in looking at mindfulness, what mindfulness is really about is bringing your awareness into the present moment. Most of us spend a lot of our time reliving things from the past. Could even be something from 5 minutes ago. It could be from 10 years ago, but we relive past events. Often we're reliving painful past events too, so that makes it a little bit harder. Or we're in the future. Again, it could be like, what do I need to cook for supper today? What's the weather tomorrow? Well, I got to do that thing at work next week. We could be now for the holidays thinking about like what's to come. And so we're in the future. We could be again tomorrow into the future. We could be 5 years into the future. And so when we're living in the past or the future, we often miss out on the present moment. And most of the time, for most people, the present moment, this very moment right here, right now, there's nothing particularly bad happening. Now, that's not to say there's never anything happening, but a lot of the times there's not anything happening in this moment. We are thinking about, you know, again, what happened previously that was painful or what's coming in the future that could be painful or difficult. So when we bring ourselves into the present moment, it's not always the intention that it has to be positive or peaceful. Sometimes we can bring ourselves into the present moment and say, gosh, I really notice I feel lonely right now in this moment. And we can be mindfully aware of it and allow ourselves to engage in another tool, which we're going to talk about later, which is self-compassion in the moment. But also when we do bring ourselves into the present moment, it helps us to be more effective. And in this moment, we can notice, like, what am I thinking right now? What are the beliefs that I'm carrying or that are affecting me in this moment? What am I doing in this moment? Is what I'm doing most helpful for me? Is this what I want to be doing in this moment or what I need to be doing in this moment to be effective? We can think about how we're feeling in our body. Maybe we're hungry, maybe we're tired, maybe we need to go to the bathroom. We haven't even noticed that for the last hour. So bringing yourself into the present moment, you can notice what's happening inside of you, and you can also notice what's happening around you. And so when we do that, it helps us to say, what would be most helpful, or where would I like my attention to be in this moment right now? And so that question, where do I want my attention to be, then allows us to make conscious choices around what will be helpful, in alignment with our values. So you can ask, who would I like to be and how would I like to act in this present moment? What's important to me? And when you do find yourself thinking about the past or the future, it doesn't mean that you can never do that, but you just can say, is this helpful for me to think about this right now? And if it's not, you can gently bring your mind into the present moment, and you might have to do that over and over and over again. What we talk about with mindfulness is that every time you catch yourself not being mindful and being more on autopilot, every time you catch that, you are successfully being mindful. So some people, when they're learning mindfulness, say, oh, I can't do this, I can't focus my mind. And that's true for a lot of us in the beginning, but it's like building a muscle of awareness. So every time we catch that we are not in the present moment, that we're not aware, and we bring ourselves into awareness, then we're actually practicing mindfulness. So it's not something, again, that we just, oh, now I'm mindful, I don't need to think about it. It is a conscious practice that we engage in. Another thing that's really helpful about mindfulness is that when we can bring ourselves into the present moment, we can actually be aware of enjoyable moments. Maybe all of you can think about, just as I explained this, like if there's been things that you've done or you've experienced that were pleasant or enjoyable, but you actually weren't really present for them, and then you didn't really get to enjoy them. It's like maybe after the fact, like could be something as simple as like, oh my gosh, I just had that really great meal and I just ate it so quickly, I can't even remember what it tasted like. I didn't really get to enjoy it. Or maybe you might over the holidays, like enjoy a really nice chocolate, and you could mindfully eat that chocolate and really experience like the taste of it, the smell of it, the sensation of it in your mouth, and really be present and enjoy the chocolate. Could be an activity, or could be a conversation that you have that you're doing over the holidays, and really to be in the moment. So like right now I'm just having this conversation with this person that I really like and I haven't seen for a long time, and I'm really just enjoying this interaction with this person in this moment. And so really kind of bringing yourself into those positive, enjoyable moments, and of course consciously creating them as much as possible. Being able to think about like, what would you like to experience through the holidays? It could be you want to have a quiet evening sitting in front of the tree and enjoying the lights and maybe putting on some Christmas music. Like, can you create that experience for yourself? And then be really present for it, and not feel like, oh, I should get up and do some cleaning, or I should wrap some presents, or I shouldn't be doing, I got so many things to do. But really just allow yourself and say, I'm going to give myself this hour, or even this 10 minutes if it's all you can manage, and just really be present in this moment of enjoyment. And so that can help you like when there are more challenging moments, because you're kind of filling up your tank. You're in having those positive experiences to kind of balance out some of the more stressful or challenging things. So mindfulness is a really powerful tool to use through the holidays. Check in with yourself about how you're feeling, what's happening in your body. If you're engaging in unhelpful thinking patterns that are contributing to emotional struggle, just notice them. Don't need to judge it. Don't need to beat yourself up for it. Just notice, oh, this is what's happening, and this is where I'd like to refocus my intention or my attention to. And just continue to work at that. Some things are going to be easier, other things are going to be a bit more challenging. But one of the things when we're learning new skills is that we encourage people to be patient with themselves as they practice it. We do encourage people to actually practice. Like, it's no good to just like learn about something and then, practice it once a month. It's not going to really be helpful. And we also encourage people to be persistent, to not give up when things are not easy or when they don't work as well as we think they should work, because these things take time to become a new way of approaching things. So again, mindfulness is really powerful. It's simple concepts, but they're hard, challenging sometimes to do. But you can start with easier things or easier moments and work your way up to addressing more difficult things with mindfulness and intention. And again, feel free to watch that other full video on mindfulness if you want to delve into it a little bit more. Another thing that can help us cope with the holidays is boundaries. A lot of people have heard about boundaries. A lot of people have some basic knowledge of boundaries. But again, where the rubber hits the road is actually setting boundaries and feeling like we have a right to set boundaries, is where some people really experience the difficulty. And boundaries can be especially helpful during the holidays, because sometimes it's the lack of boundaries that can add to or increase our struggle. So a simple definition of boundaries is that they define what is appropriate behavior in our relationships. They're the behaviors that keep both of us safe. And a boundary is a limit or an edge that defines you as separate from others. So sometimes we think that boundaries have to be harsh, or that they're mean, or that they're going to be hurtful to other people. But boundaries are actually helpful to both parties. The only thing, again, is that we only have control over our boundaries. And so where it can sometimes be challenging is if our boundary that we want to set is different than another person's boundary. So we'll look at this with some examples of different types of boundaries. So we have physical boundaries, which is our physical space, our personal space. We can think about our body, like we have boundaries around like who we want to hug, who's welcome in like our kind of our personal space. So if you think about like if you were to spread your own arms out and make a circle around your body, that's kind of like, for most of us, our personal space. Some people's personal space is bigger, especially if they experience trauma. Other people might have a smaller personal space and not really mind having people, even strangers, like kind of standing physically close. You can notice this what happens like in a lineup. Sometimes like some people will be like really close and other people are trying to edge away and get more space. So our physical space can vary, but generally it's like an arm's length distance around us. So we have a right to say, this is my boundary around physical space and who I am comfortable having in this space. So if I'm in a relationship with someone and my boundaries, I don't like to hug everybody, and I only hug certain people that I feel especially close to, but I have a friend who likes to hug, I'm allowed to set a boundary and say, I'm not comfortable with that. Sometimes we don't set the boundaries because we're afraid we're going to offend people, or people are going to get mad at us, or people are going to, like, not want to be in relationship with us again. But what we want to really emphasize is that if I don't set that boundary for myself and I allow those hugs, then that relationship is going to be uncomfortable for me. And I'm probably going to consciously or unconsciously start to withdraw from that person who hugs me because I'm not feeling safe and respected. But I haven't asserted my boundary. The other person doesn't know they're violating my boundary. Another thing that happens with our boundaries is we think that other people should automatically know them because they are so clear to us. But again, everybody has their own different perceptions of what they're comfortable with. And so we all tend to think that our boundary is the norm when it's not. And so we don't often express our boundary or enforce our boundary. And then we get, like I said earlier, violated or even angry with people who violate our boundaries. But we also can say, but have I actually communicated it to them? So by communicating to my friend, hey, I don't really feel comfortable with hugs. Like I, have a big personal space. Could we just like kind of shake hands, or could, we just kind of like wave at each other? That would make me feel more comfortable. I'm actually increasing the likelihood of that friendship being healthy and safe and being sustained because I'm not going to want to withdraw or limit my contact with that person from feeling uncomfortable. And those points are true for all these different types of boundaries that I'm going to explain. So being able to know what is your personal comfort and how do you communicate that with other people. In healthy, safe relationships, people are going to hear your boundary and they're going to respect it and they're going to honor it. But we all can have people in our life that are not as healthy for various reasons and may not be as respectful or as honoring of your boundary. That does not mean your boundary is wrong or that you don't have a right to set it, but you may have challenges and it may be more difficult to set boundaries, but it doesn't mean that they're not. They're actually more important to enforce and set with people whose boundaries are more fluid. I'm going to actually skip ahead to the next slide for a second and come back. So healthy boundaries, it's a continuum, of course. Some people have very rigid boundaries where they keep people like really, really separate. Other people have very porous boundaries where they don't really know where they end and another person begins. Healthy is somewhere in the middle. So if I'm trying to have a healthy boundary with someone who has a very porous boundary, they're going to have difficulty understanding and knowing what I mean. So I will have to be ideally very consistent in setting that boundary and continuously say, like, no, that's not okay with me, or I'm not comfortable with that, and following through with our actions. Same thing if I'm with a person, if a person has really rigid boundaries and they're not comfortable, then it might not necessarily be healthy, but we still have to respect that because otherwise we're violating their boundary. So back to the types of boundaries, we also can, as this is something really important as we think about the holiday season, time. We all tend to have, many of us, I should say, not everybody, but many people tend to have busier schedules, more obligations during the holiday season, but you do get to choose how you spend your time. For everything, like you might feel like I don't have a choice about whether I go to that social or whether I go to that family get together or those, but you do actually have a choice. Sometimes we just don't acknowledge that we're making a choice, even if we feel like I don't want to say no to that person because I don't want them to feel like they're not important. That's still a choice we're making. So we can think about our time and how we spend our time over the holidays. We have a choice around our mental boundaries, that we're allowed to have our own thoughts, our own opinions, our own values. This can be especially helpful, again, when we're socializing with people who might have different opinions on things, and we might feel like we don't have a right to express. So this can tie into our material or financial boundary, because we might say, I'm allowed to have the opinion that I don't want to spend more than $20 on a gift for a coworker. That's my opinion. I'm allowed to have that opinion. I'm allowed to set that financial boundary for myself. And, you know, sometimes again, other people might not agree with it, but I'm allowed to have that, and I'm allowed to assert that boundary. So we can have our own opinions and our own thoughts. We're allowed to decide how emotionally available we are to other people. So if we are feeling drained, or we're feeling overwhelmed, or we just maybe we have other people that we're supporting, we may not be able to be emotionally available to all or every person in our life at every given moment. So we can set boundaries around that. Maybe we have a friend that calls us like 12 o'clock in the night when we're sound asleep, and we feel like we have no choice but to answer the phone. But we do have a choice. And again, we might choose to answer the phone, but recognize we have a choice around that. We have a right to set boundaries around our property and our finances and around our belongings. So if someone asks to borrow money, or someone asks to borrow things that we own, we can decide if that feels okay for us and say yes or no, depending on those comfort levels. We have a right to our self-regulation, so how we expend our energy on ourselves versus other people. Many people feel like they're being selfish or doing something wrong if they take time for themselves. It ties back to our time boundary and our mental boundaries and our emotional boundaries, but we do have a right to set space for ourselves. And another thing we have a right to that can also be really important to recognize during the holidays is our conversational boundaries, topics we feel comfortable talking about and some things we don't feel comfortable talking about. It could be, you know, we don't want to talk about politics or religion, or maybe we don't want to talk about like a problem we dealt with through the year. Maybe we want to talk about our health. There could be many different topics that we may or may not feel comfortable. Some people are open books and don't mind talking about anything and ask questions about things that we might consider private. And just because someone's doing it doesn't mean that we have to reciprocate if we're not comfortable. So you can think about where your boundaries are. It's actually an important step of setting boundaries is to actually think about it, pay attention to how you feel in different situations, because that will give you cues for what you want your boundaries to be. And also your boundaries can vary from person to person or situation to situation, or even day to day sometimes. But it is helpful if you have somewhat of consistent boundaries with people. So for example, if you have a boundary around time one day and then it's changed the next day and then it changes the day after, it's confusing sometimes for people in your life to know, well, what is your boundary consistently? And sometimes it might be more fluid because you haven't fully allowed yourself to consider what would be a healthy, stable boundary to set. So this might be then like require more communication, because people might not know, okay, Jackie's boundary is like, you know, that she has these commitments, so she's not available like every day for a conversation, but she's available once a week for a conversation. So like those types of things might be helpful to have like somewhat of a consistency around. And communicate that. The big thing of boundaries is communication. So when it comes to communication, one of the things that we talk about is how to communicate your boundaries. So there's a skill called Dear Man, which comes from dialectical behavior therapy. This is a skill that's really helpful. It gives you a step-by-step process of how you can set your boundaries, how you can ask for what you need in relationships. So getting your needs met more consistently. It also is a way you can say no to things. So I'm going to play this video again. There might be a little commercial at the beginning. We'll just kind of ride out. And you can feel free to come back and watch this video again and follow the steps. When you look at this and you learn these steps, it's really important when you're learning to communicate assertively. It's helpful to actually like even write down these things as you're preparing to talk to somebody while you're practicing and getting comfortable with this skill. So let's watch this video.
Build a website you love.
I'll skip this commercial.
Quick fix. For your words.
There we go.
Dear Man is an interpersonal skill set used when you'd like to ask someone for something in a way that will more likely get them to say yes. It's based on assertiveness training models and can be extremely effective depending on several factors. You may find as you listen that assertiveness like this doesn't fit with what you've learned from your family or your culture. That's okay. See if there's anything within this skill that could still work for you. The term Dear Man is a way to remember each skill: describe, express, assert, reinforce, stay mindful, appear confident, and negotiate. First, describe the current situation using just the facts. For example, you told me you would do the dishes last night, but this morning when I came downstairs, the dirty dishes were still there. This helps orient the person to exactly what you're reacting to. You might be tempted to say more like, "You're always annoying with this stuff." Don't do this. Keep your describe short, concise, and objective in order to grab the person's attention and avoid making them feel defensive. Next, express clearly how you feel or your opinion about the situation. Don't assume the person knows how you feel. For example, I felt disappointed when I saw the dishes weren't done. By sharing your personal reaction, you're helping the person understand why you're making the request. Next, assert your request by clearly asking for what you want. Don't assume the other person knows what you want. Be clear, concise, and specific. For example, can you please do the dishes now? Or, if you know you're not going to get to the dishes, can you tell me so that I can do them and we can have a clean sink in the morning? Notice how each assert was a question. It's not enough to simply express, "I'd like you to do the dishes." It's also not effective to demand, "Do the dishes now." Asking an assertive question can be uncomfortable for people at first and may require a lot of practice. Finally, reinforce or reward the other person ahead of time by explaining what they could gain by giving you what you want. At a minimum, this can be expressing appreciation or gratitude, just by saying, "I'd really appreciate it." Or try being more specific to the situation. Our living space would be cleaner, which would make me less stressed. I know I'm a lot easier to live with when I'm not so stressed. Now, the other person might interrupt you, argue with you, or try to change the subject. This is why it's important to use the skill of staying mindful of your goal in the situation. If needed, express your opinion or reassert your request again and again. It might feel silly, or you might be tempted to change up your script. Instead, just repeat in a calm voice, "Can you please do the dishes now?" Or, "I would still like you to do the dishes now." If the person responds with their own request, becomes mean, or tries to divert you, don't take the bait. Stay on topic and be mindful of your request. It also helps to appear confident with your voice and body posture. Convey that you know what you want and you're deserving of it too, while still respecting the other person. Don't whisper, stammer, or look down. Instead, speak up and stand tall. The skill is called appear confident, not be confident for a reason. Fake it until you make it. Finally, negotiate if you need to. Be willing to give in order to get. This may involve reducing your request or offering another solution to the problem. For example, how about I unload the dishwasher first so you can empty the sink? Another way to negotiate is to turn the tables and ask the other person for solutions. What do you think we should do? I would like a clean sink in the morning, and you really seem to not want to do the dishes at night. How can we solve this problem? Dear Man can also be used to say no to a request. Using the same steps, say no clearly. If someone asked you to hang out and you wanted to say no, a Dear Man response could look like this. "Hey, I'm feeling pretty drained and tired. I can't hang out today. It'd be more fun on a different day when I have more energy. Can we hang out one day next week instead?" Notice how describe wasn't necessary since the person already knew what you were reacting to. Notice how you asserted clearly, "I can't hang out today," instead of saying something unclear like, "I don't think I can today," or "I'm not sure." Dear Man is a skill that works best when practiced. Practice writing your Dear Man out ahead of time and rehearse in front of a mirror or another person. Describe, express, assert, reinforce, stay mindful, appear confident, and negotiate when necessary.
So that video is very well detailed in describing Dear Man. So what I would suggest, if this is something that you feel will be helpful for you in setting boundaries, is even to go back and watch that video again, or we will also have another video called Effective Communication as part of the Wellness Wednesday series. So we'll go into more detail on this particular coping strategy for the holidays of communication. So this goes back to referring back to early stages of things that can lead to struggle during the holidays is those relationships, those interactions with other people. It could be coworkers, it could be family members, it could be at social gatherings with strangers. So the interactions and the interpersonal between people relationships can be a source of joy, but it also can be a source of struggle. For people who have difficulty asking for things or saying no to things, Dear Man gives you, like I said earlier, a step-by-step script that you can create and follow. If you have not spoken assertively or you're not used to this, it can feel a little bit or a lot uncomfortable for some people in the beginning. But remember, again, the patience, the persistence, and the practice. This is an effective communication strategy to use. So just know you're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable or awkward. It might feel like a little bit fake in the beginning to communicate in this way. But as you practice, it'll become more natural and you'll find your own ways of using this, finding your own ways of expressing yourself. A really important thing to know about Dear Man is that this is very to the point. It's not often when we engage in interactions or discussions with people and we're asking for something or we're trying to say no, we tend to be very wordy, we tend to be vague in our statements, we tend to get defensive or feel like we have to justify things. So this script is really 4 sentences, 5 or 6 at the most. You're not talking at length. You're basically using a sentence for each one of these, the D, E, A, and R. So when you do think about like situations you have coming up, sometimes we have reoccurring situations that we can pretty accurately predict. It's not like kind of doing worst case scenarios of things that are not likely to happen, but we might have a person that we interact with regularly and we have a long-term pattern that's maybe difficult for us that we know is going to happen again. So we can do a Dear Man script in advance, and then when the opportunity comes up to need it, we have it all practiced and we have it planned, which helps us to be more effective in the moment. Because if you're trying to do this just kind of off the top of your head with no practice, it's probably going to go sideways. So doing some scripts in advance and just imagining, like doing even a little mental rehearsal in your mind, like a little mini movie of you practicing it and saying it and being effective in saying what you want to say is really big part of using Dear Man. So that's a really helpful skill to have in your back pocket for the holiday season, how to ask for what you need or how to say no to requests that are not really helpful or ones you want to give into. And then we're going to talk about self-compassion and self-care for the holidays. Again, there's another whole session on this topic. So if this one really resonates with you and you feel like this is like kind of the coping strategy that's most important to you, you might want to go and watch that full video on self-compassion and self-care. But for the sake of this session and just putting this into your toolbox for the holidays, we want to really encourage people to think about approaching the holidays with self-compassion and engaging in self-care. So self-compassion and self-care they are separate topics, but they do go nicely together. Self-compassion, as you can kind of see from this picture on the slide, is like, how do we actually care for ourselves? Like it's more of like the emotional or the mental stance where we say like, I matter and I'm going to prioritize and take care of myself the same as I would for other people. Many of us are very good at caring for others and extending compassion to others. If we think about how do we show compassion to others, we might say things like, well, I let someone know I'm there for them. I might, if I know they're going through a hard time, I might do something thoughtful for them. I might bring them a meal, or I might, treat them to something. I would say comforting things to them. I might give them a hug. So these are all the things that we would do for other people, but we really don't think about how can we give that to ourselves, that same care and grace to ourselves. And in fact, many of us do the exact opposite. We actually are harsh with ourselves. We are insulting to ourselves. We punish ourselves. We say harsh things to ourselves, like what's wrong with me? Or, I should get over this. Or this is not such a big deal, and what's wrong? Like, why am I reacting this way? Or at the very least, we're kind of like numb to ourselves. Like, we maybe not everybody goes so far as to actually be like harsh, but we just may be cold or detached and not really allowing ourselves to process that we may be experiencing something challenging or hard. So self-compassion is really loving and caring for ourselves and seeing our own humanity, and that we are deserving of care and comfort as much as everybody else. Sometimes with self-compassion, we think that we can't give it to ourselves, and we may look outwardly for other people to extend the compassion to us, which is valid and fine, and it's great if we can get that compassion from other people. But sometimes other people may not know, or we may be really good at hiding it, and we may be like very good at putting on a mask, and people don't even know we're struggling because we may appear super confident or super competent and capable, and like we got everything under control. And so we don't even give people the opportunity to extend us compassion. Whatever the case, whether we don't have people to extend compassion or people don't know we need it, it is still a really good option and really important option to give our own self-compassion. Sometimes if we don't give our own self-compassion, even if other people are trying, we can't receive it. So they may be doing all kinds of compassionate things, but it's like kind of that phrase, like water running off a duck's back, like the compassion might just slide off of us and we can't really absorb it. So giving ourselves compassion is saying things like, this is really hard, or it's okay for me to be struggling right now. And we can literally give ourselves a hug, or we can wrap ourselves up in our coziest blanket and do nurturing things for ourselves. So this kind of where self-compassion could also connect over to self-care, because we often have, many of us, probably everybody's heard of self-care. We might even engage in some self-care at times. But if we can actually do self-care as a way to practice self-compassion, it is actually more powerful. The other thing about self-care is if we also do it mindfully. So having self-compassion is a way we can be mindful. We can say, I'm going through something really difficult right now, or this time of year is really hard for me, and I really want to acknowledge that, and I want to take care of myself, and I want to be kind to myself. So I'm going to engage in some self-care. And as I do the self-care, I'm going to work on trying to be really present in the activity of self-care. So that then takes something we might do a little bit of already and really enhances the benefit of it. So from this slide, you can see there's all different kinds of self-care that we can engage in. One of the things I want to stress about self-care is that self-care is not always doing warm and fuzzy things. Like we might think about, getting a nice bubble bath or going for a massage, or might think of extravagant things like going on a holiday. But self-care can be lots of little moments that we may not otherwise even know. So as an example, maybe we're driving somewhere. Maybe we have to drive somewhere anyway. We're driving to a social event, or we're driving to a get-together, or we're driving to go shopping. We have to drive there anyway, sorry. So we can say, I'm going to acknowledge that this is going to be tough for me. This activity is a bit stressful. I want to do some self-care. So maybe during my drive, I might put on my favorite music, and I'm going to really be mindfully present of just listening and enjoying the music. Or I might enjoy the quiet. I might turn all the radio off, and I might just say, I'm going to allow myself to enjoy the silence of this drive. And maybe as we're driving, we're looking at some nice scenery as we are driving, or maybe we're just, in the moment of just having the quiet solitude. Maybe we might put on an audiobook, or we might put on an affirmation meditation. So we can use that drive, that 5, 10, half hour, whatever drive, and turn it into self-care. We're not necessarily having to carve out extra time in our schedule, so we can certainly do that too. But it's looking for those little moments where we can refill our cup and recharge our batteries and acknowledge that we matter and we want to take care of ourselves. So again, from this slide here, you can see we can take care of our physical body by just engaging in healthy activities, things that feel good for our body, getting proper sleep, being active, things like going for a massage, drinking water, getting a warm bath. We can do emotional self-care by practicing boundaries that we just talked about, engaging in self-compassion, journaling, doing an activity we enjoy like painting or drawing, listening to music. Social self-care kind of identifies that we are social creatures and we do need to have connection with other people. So whatever that social connection looks like for you that would be helpful and healthy, that's what social self-care would look like. So when we're in the holidays, we might be engaging in some social contacts that may not always feel like self-care, but to try to balance it out with things that would be supportive. So maybe we go to a big social gathering, but the next night we have a quiet tea with a really close friend. Spiritual self-care can be anything that helps you feel like you have a sense of who you are, or if you do have a belief in a type of higher power. It does not have to be a religious thing, although if you do practice religion and religion is something that is helpful for you, you can certainly practice your spiritual self-care in that way. But it could be also going out in nature. It could be doing a meditation. It could be doing yoga. It could be saying affirmations to yourself. Like those can be examples of spiritual self-care. We also have personal self-care about learning things like a new hobby, having activities that we enjoy, treating ourselves in some way. And we then have environmental self-care, taking care of spaces that we are in. Sometimes I might feel there's extra clutter or extra things around our house at Christmas time, but we also might enjoy some of the environmental things, like maybe you might enjoy the Christmas decorations, or you might enjoy the lights that are part of the holiday season. So sometimes the environmental self-care might mean just taking a moment to take those things in. So it would be helpful for you, again, if you would be open to it, to pause your video here now and write down, as the holidays are approaching, what would be some examples of self-care that you can fit in. It doesn't, again, have to be, taking a full day off. It can be that if that's possible for you, but it could be like little 5-minute breaks that you might take, or going to bed on time, or, allowing yourself to have a treat over the holidays. Like, write down what are some of the things that might be possible and helpful for you for self-care in the coming days and weeks as you are entering into the holiday season. So I'm going to pause here and let you have a moment to pause the video and write down some of these ideas. So we're nearing the end of our session now, if you've paused and unpaused. So this is just little examples, like you can create like little fun self-care checklists, but you can also do them like we talked about for specifically for the holiday season. So hopefully from that little pause, you might have some ideas written down. And I would encourage you to put that somewhere visible and just mindfully, again, this is what I said earlier, that mindfulness is often the foundation for other tools, because if we don't mindfully pay attention to and remember, then we may not do any of these self-care things. You could even, as you finish this session today, take out your phone and maybe even create some reminders or schedule things in for yourself on your phone calendar, or you could put sticky notes on your fridge or your bathroom mirror. You could put this self-care checklist by your bedside table to remind you. But one of the things about mindfulness and all the tools overall is remembering to use them, because we tend to fall back into our old coping mechanisms, our habits. And so the persistence part of learning new skills, remembering to use them is one of the pieces of the puzzle that sometimes is just problem solving to figure out. So I hope that this session's been helpful for you in considering the holiday season. We always like to just end our sessions with a little bit of information on different resources that are available. Some of these are directly through NL Health, and many of them can be found, or maybe all of them actually can be found on Bridge the Gap. We also like to encourage people to reach out or know about our partnership with LifeWise, which is a community organization that offers peer support. They have special supports and special events around the holiday season. So you can certainly feel free to reach out to LifeWise and look at what they have to offer. And then overall on Bridge the Gap, there are many, many different options available for ongoing learning, ongoing support, different pieces of counseling available. And so just encourage you to go to Bridge the Gap and browse around and see what might be helpful for you if you would like to do a little bit more around your mental health. And I mentioned earlier, if you do want to reach out for a one-on-one session, it could be in person or virtual. All through the province, Newfoundland and Labrador, there are Doorways clinics. So you just can Google your nearest health center, your nearest hub, and Doorways, and you'll find information on your local clinic and the hours and how to contact. So feel free to reach out. Also feel free to watch other videos that are part of our Wellness Wednesday series. More will be always uploaded over time. So if there are limited ones right now, just keep on checking back. And also just to put out information about our provincial mental health and addictions groups. They're also available on Bridge the Gap, a list of all of our offerings. We do regularly have new offerings available. We usually have groups in the winter, the spring, some through the summer, and then again in the fall. We have groups that you can join at any time, and you can drop into, when you're available. And we also have what we call closed groups that are usually from 8 to 10 to 12 weeks, depending on which one. And so you would come to those groups regularly every week. So if you would like some more support, some of the topics that we covered here today on coping with the holidays, the boundaries, the mindfulness, the values, we go into more depth in our treatment groups, as well as I've already said that we either have now or we will have uploaded specific videos on some of these topics if you want to go through some of them in a bit more detail. So just to stress that there are many mental health supports available, and certainly feel free to explore them and reach out as needed. And also to validate that not everybody needs additional support. Some people just might enjoy these videos as a validation of things that you're already working on, or a reminder of things that you've learned, or just in and of themselves, I hope that these videos will have things that you can take away and practice and may meet your needs. To clue up for today, I just want to share our evaluation. So if you could take the time, it's a very quick feedback evaluation for these sessions. And so you can scan this QR code, or you can go to the address that's above and click it and take 5 minutes to just give us some feedback on how you found this session. You also can feel welcome if you have other topics that you think would be helpful to provide these videos or Wellness Wednesday sessions on. I'm always happy to receive suggestions. So my email address for the NL groups is here at the bottom, nlgroups@nlhealthservices.ca. So you can email that email address and also provide feedback if you want to, or if you have any questions, you can certainly send them to that email address. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to attend this session. And I really want to, as I said at the beginning, encourage you to give yourself a pat on the back and acknowledge the positive for you of taking the time out to think about your mental health and think about how you'd like to cope with the holidays that you may be entering into at this time. I hope that you found some information in the session helpful for you, and I hope you have a nice holiday season.